For the latest top tips, reviews and advice, please subscribe below.
Hello and welcome to Attwoolls Outdoors with me, Mike. Telling you guys a bit of an advice video really about kind of the differences between a pole tent and an air tent. To be fair, even a poled and air awning. So we're almost going to go through a bit of a comparison video, tell you a little bit the pros and cons of both, and a little bit of detail about both as well. So hopefully you can kind of decide whether you want to go down lines of something more pole based or something more kind of air. So first thing, I mean, poles has been around since, well, the beginning of time, it seems. So that's sort of back in caveman days. Now, essentially, it's the more conventional method. And certainly we've seen in the past where it used to be kind of all steel framed tents. Back in the old Cabanon, Trigano, Relum days. It all used to be steel framed tents like so. It progressed really sort of about the late 90s, mid 90s actually probably, into kind of more what we call seen today like kind of tunnel or dome start tents using different materials. The most common two materials we see now when it comes to tents and also a bit of awnings is either fiberglass or steel. Aluminium's a bit too expensive, but you do see it a bit really, but it has the same kind of properties as steel, just a bit lighter in terms of weight. Starting with fiberglass. Fiberglass itself is a very inexpensive material to physically produce. It's light in weight. It's obviously quite compact when it's packed away, and these are all big benefits. Now, one of the things that it also is fiberglass is designed to do, if for some reason that it's got a bit of flex to it. So if for some reason you kind of exceed what the fiberglass is really designed to do, it's designed to basically shatter down the actual length of it. This is designed because what you can do is just get some gaff tape, tape it up, still use it, and then replace the individual section. Sections are very expensive, probably best part of, I don't know, £4 at maximum per section, and they tend to be fairly universal. So you can make sure you get the right diameter and then cut the length down as you see fit. All you've got is a knot at either end, the cord runs all the way through, and the knot's just big enough to open that up. So you can pull it off, snip it off, replace whatever section you need to, pull it back through and tie a knot through. So we've got separate videos about how to replace poles and things like that, but it really offers a great sort of tent, a good price point. Admittedly, it's kind of, not quite as strong or as structurally stable as you'd find with a steel pole tent, or actually even in air, but it's a nice sort of compromise. It's been around easily over 20-25 years, and to a lot of people's basis, it's what is the standard. It means that you can suddenly get a big tent that necessarily is not overly expensive. It's still quite structurally stable, not to the extent of steel or air, but it's quite nicely. It's almost worth saying at this point, actually, to be fair, that probably, to be fair, a poorly pitched steel or air tent would perform worse than a well-pitched fiberglass. So it's not just about kind of the tools you have and the what your material is made of, or it's all come down to how you pitch it as well as necessarily what you are pitching. So that's quite crucial. So what we also moving on is we move on to steel. So steel, like I said, we've seen it traditionally more kind of steel frame tents. We've kind of got it in more a more sort of modern twist, and often you find steel is kind of a little bit dying, to be fair, in terms of seeing it out on the marketplace, mainly because prices are just again increasing. Yes, it's strong and robust, but that's where kind of air is kind of eating into that bit really, and a lot of people kind of more converted to air than they are into kind of the steel pole tents. I'm thinking really there's only a couple of manufacturers now who still make steel pole tents, but it's still got a space in the market, and most people who don't want to go down the airline, it works well. Steel is strong, it's robust. What you also find is that you can actually get some really nice kind of pre-angles because it's very stiff. So you've got a very vertical part and it locks into kind of a really arched. So again, really nice and strong and very structurally stable, especially when it comes to winds. We also find when you've got this kind of pre-arch thing, it's also shaped. So often the arches have kind of got a special kind of barrel to lock into the uprights. Again, stops it twisting and keeps it nice and stable. Traditionally, you try to find this, it tends to come in 2-pack sizes, just because the overall steel structure on its own is quite weighty, and when you put that on with obviously the tents, really you want 2 more manageable sizes, whereas fiberglass, although it necessarily normally comes in 1 bag, again you could probably split it up if you wanted to make it a bit more manageable. It's only really tend we see the top end tents now come in steel poled, just because it's purely a price pointer sort of thing, and from there we then kind of move on to air. Now, air has been around since 2011. It was introduced from Vango in the tents category, and 2012 in awnings from camper. That was basically, from Vango's perspective, 10 years of preparation before it went live on 2011. And if I'm being honest, the first year it didn't go well. It was the second year, and how they bounced back and redid it really put testament to it. And every single thing got replaced the following year. A little bit of history there. So now we're best part of over 10 years on from that first point, and arguably I think there's probably nearly equal amount of air tents in the market in relation to poled, certainly from sort of more premium family camping for sure. And it's, whereas it particularly was very high end, it's now been filtered down into much more affordable price points, and in terms of spec, something again that's sort of just the essentials rather high end, top end features built into the tent itself. In terms of principle, it's very quick and easy to pitch. A big 6-8 man tent, I can pitch that on my own in the best part of 10 to 12 minutes. If we were to do the same with pole tents, a minute's probably a bit longer. If you've got 2 people knowing what they're doing, you could probably get down to that sort of pitch time. But for me, one thing I do like about air is you peg it down, pump it up and guy it out. In terms of overall structural strength, I would say air for me is as strong as steel, if not stronger. One of the joys of having air is that it's got a little bit of give into it. So if you get kind of those winds are a little bit beyond what you should be kind of camping in, the worst thing it's going to do is kind of pop in, bow in a little bit and pop straight back out. With steel, you don't really get that. You find it's going to essentially bend and break, and then you've got another issue to worry about. Worst case scenario, air's going to bounce down and bounce back up. No breakage, no harm done. Fiberglass, like I said, has still got that kind of flex point. It's got more certainly flex to it, and more like the air, but hasn't got that same kind of robust sort of diameter frame. So what you find in terms of the air as well, you also find there'll be different diameter beams. Traditionally, most of them tend to be around a 10 centimetre, but some of the larger ones and polycotton ones, which are a little bit heavier, require a little bit a larger diameter, so they go up to about 13 as well. And again, what you find also in some of the cheaper ones, it's a good way to cut the price point is make the diameter of that a bit smaller. Most of them tend to be each beam's done individually, and does vary on the tent itself. There are new ones on the market now which are a single point inflation, which means in theory what you can do is put an electric pump on it, press a button, it inflates for you. All of the air tents tend to come with a hand pump as standard, and they're all regulated to a pressure. One of the most common questions we get asked about air to a certain extent is, what happens if it bursts? And to be fair, it's no different to what happens if a tent pole breaks or a tent pole snaps. You simply replace it. The joys of kind of air is a similar kind of concept to a bike tyre, that you've got an inner bladder, an outer casing, and then actually the tent itself. So the joys of if you had an issue, you can just either unzip the outer sleeve in the tent, unsleep the sort of casing, get down to the bladder, put a patch on it, replace it, or repair it completely. So the bladders tend to be something like this. So it's just literally a dead, long, straight PVC tube, nothing to it, with a valve located on it. So it's dead straight, and the actual casing itself gives its curvature. So there's no reason that if you wanted to carry a spare tube, which I would recommend, it's better to have and not need than need and not have. You know, you don't go away on a holiday with not a spare tyre in your car. You know, it's the same kind of ends. If something does go wrong, it's better to have something you can sort it out. Failing that, there are a load of service centres kind of around the UK who do carry spare bladders, and it does depend on the brand in terms of that as well. The tubes itself, like I said, and often what a lot of brands will do is they'll have one tube fits all of their kind of beams. So often you see different heights in poles, different heights in air beams. Now, Again, by having one that's longer, you can fold it over to make it a little bit shorter. There's variants of valves on the market as well, so it depends on, have a look at that. We've done a sort of separate video talking about kind of getting to know your tent and awning, so you can always have a look at that as well if you want to see the different valves and how they work. So we try to give you a bit more information on that. One thing I would mention is when we kind of go to the likes of air, certainly in kind of the more top end points, is that because essentially the poles to a certain extent are already in-threaded into the actual tent itself, there's no need to feed anything. Like I said, just literally peg it and pump it. The overall pack weight is a little bit heavier and a touch bulkier. Yes, you don't have, you know, the fiberglass poles in a big bunch or the steel poles in a separate bag, but it combines the weight into one. So it's always worth checking the pack weights and pack sizes to make sure it's something that's manageable. A lot of the top end ones will come in physical roller bags as well. And again, you can buy, like I said, a bit more of an additional roller bag if you wanted to kind of get a better kind of package and make it more manageable from in and out the car. So all in all, we've got different points, and what we see now, actually, to be fair, is that they not only do kind of fiberglass pole tents in kind of polyester, but they do it in top end fabrics. So we're in a scenario now where you've probably got more choice than ever, so you can pretty much kind of choose your spec level, whether you want fiberglass, steel, or air. Choose your spec in terms of the fabric as well. So there's a real sort of amalgamation of mix and match on the marketplace. So it depends on what kind of is important to you and what goes well. By all means, you're always welcome to check the link below this video. We've kind of got each of these tents kind of listed in there if you're a bit curious to what they are. And typically what we do at Attwoolls is we kind of do pitching, packing videos for literally everything really. So if you want to see how something quick and easy something really is to pitch, regardless of whether it's air or poled, you've got that capability. And we've always again got additional tutorial videos talking about or showing you and explaining through the pitching process. So yeah, just to kind of give you a bit of insight into what we're looking at. Definitely, as I said, recommend, regardless of what kind of poles case scenario you tend to choose, then I'd definitely look at getting spare parts or having it with you, just a single section of fiberglass, a bladder which goes in there. Steel, admittedly, is a bit harder because every single bit is bespoke. And it's not kind of one size fits all you get with kind of bladders or kind of fiberglass. So that's a little bit trickier, but still having a repair kit of some sort is always handy. By all means, let us know what you kind of think in terms of the argument versus poled versus air scenario. It's always great to have kind of feedback from you. And it's interesting always to see what's on the campsites. And a lot of people, admittedly, I will say, have bad experiences all three. Probably it's just all about understanding kind of the process and how to essentially repair or replace. And a lot of people will flitter between the two. And it's worth also mentioning, to be fair, the quality of the product, whether it's poled or air, is determined on by the manufacturer and who makes it. So a high street shop selling an air tent is not the same as kind of a big brand selling an air tent. You know, there's different spec levels in each of it, as you would see with multiple tents these days. So it's not always as necessarily, if you do get a failure of something with an air tube, it's maybe just down to the way the product's made. And it's, like I said, it happens. We get it with tires, with our cars, we get it with tents. It's just part of the joys of camping, shall we say. Like I said, for more information, by all means, check the link below the video, take you through to our website. We've got a range of sort of poled and air tents all there for available. And any more questions and queries, feel free to comment in the box below. But that's kind of our little video view of comparing kind of a pole tent to an air tent.